Hello everyone, welcome back. Today, I Shivansh Bansal, along with Shivang Joshi, founders at Law Community, is here with Mr. David Galea. He's joining us from Dubai, and he is maritime and energy lawyer and general counsel, strategic advisor, and chairman and founder at MentorMeet and co-founder at AssetSmart. We are here to know more about his journey and how he started his career. So, my first question is, what made you step into the world of law, and how was your law school experience been?
Right. So I apparently, according to my parents, announced that I wanted to be a lawyer age 6 on stage at a school play. And it never changed since then. The first memories I have of wanting to be a lawyer are watching Perry Mason episodes. It used to be an old black and white American TV series. And again, it was, court, people advocating, arguing in court, being right, the sense of justice and sort of making sure that an innocent person is freed and whatnot, which is ironic because I've never been a litigation lawyer. I've never been particularly interested in litigation. I've never set foot in court and frankly don't intend to. Um, um, in terms of my law school experience, so I graduated undergrad in Malta and then I did a master's in the UK. And in Malta, law school is 6 years. It's basically 3 degrees, a diploma, a bachelor's, and a doctorate. And we learned everything from, Maltese constitutional law to English constitutional law to comparative European law, tax, environment, you name it. They sort of threw it at us. And while it was an interesting experience and a fantastic immersion, I walked out of law school going, I don't really know how to practice law. I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do in the profession. I have a lot of theory in my head. I know what the code says. But in terms of translating that into advice to clients and sort of doing what the job is, there was a substantial gap. And that's difficult for a new graduate who, frankly, from a business perspective, needs to add value immediately. So I thoroughly enjoyed my university experience. I did a lot of stuff. I volunteered. I took part in student politics. I missed. There was a year in law school where I missed more lectures than I actually went to. But what I felt is that the extra bits beyond law are actually what made me successful today, rather than the academic part of law. My grades were important. They got me through the door. But a lot of what I learned, I have never used. It was the skills that I gained, the public speaking, the being on stage, the organizational elements when you're organizing events. It's the participating in sort of student politics debates, etc. Those have helped me much more in terms of self-confidence, soft skills, ability to argue and convince and sell to other people than actually studying, probate or stuff like that, which I've never actually specialized in, done, or would never touch during the course of my career.
Okay, so my next question is, if you were not such a successful lawyer, then what line of work do you envision yourself in?
It's a very good question. I like law, and I like law because law opens many doors. But I am not a lawyer who is in love with law, in the sense that you have a lot of lawyers, and a number of my ex-colleagues, loved the theory behind the law. They love the law itself as an instrument and whatnot. For me, law serves a purpose, and the purpose that it serves is solving problems. Sometimes it serves the purpose of creating them, but for the most part, in a business, whether you're in private practice or you are in-house, you are there to solve problems, to manage crises, and to help the business. So I would have no issues walking away from a law career and diving into a business career. I am a transactional lawyer by nature. I'm a transactional lawyer by career. I have always been involved in deal making and advising businesses on those deals. And I would have no issue with stepping away from a legal career into a commercial career being the person driving those deals rather than advising the person driving those deals. So yeah, if I had a redo, I probably would still study law, I have to admit. I would have probably left it by now, I have to admit, if I did redo it. And I would either be running my own business or more focused, and having done an MBA, moved into more general management. So, commercial general management, industry agnostic, although obviously in terms of general management, sometimes the experience in an industry helps. So, I love shipping. Working in a commercial role in shipping and a non-legal role in shipping is probably what I would have ended up doing had I not still been a lawyer at this point in time. And I don't rule out doing it in the future. Let's put it that way.
So, as a vice president, legal of international maritime industries, how does your day look like?
It looks like a lot of meetings. We are a very, very new company. So the company is 2.5 years old. We are a shipyard, and essentially we will be once ironically, we are a shipyard that doesn't have a shipyard at the moment because our shipyard is still under construction. So as part of the Saudi 2030 initiative of diversifying the economy, the Saudi government has decided to invest in sort of maritime infrastructure, and the shipyard is part of that investment. So we are a joint venture of Saudi Aramco, largest company in the world, and the Saudi National Oil Company, Bahri, which is a ship owning company, again, owned by Saudis, Lamprell, which is a public listed company that is a shipyard that repairs and constructs rigs, and Hyundai Heavy Industries, which is again one of the largest shipyards in the world in Korea. So my day is dealing with the various different facets of the business, and supporting them with whatever they need. Now that can range from, looking at a situation which is COVID-19 driven, which is that we need to onboard someone quickly because there is a urgent requirement, but we can't bring them in, we can't start their employment contract, we can't give them the residency visas, etc. So we need to employ them on a sort of pre-employment consultancy basis, and what do those contracts look like, and what the NDA looks like, and drafting that sort of thing, to the negotiation of a multi-million-dollar deal with a counterpart. So you have the whole gamut. So it's ranging from, supporting an operations team with a force majeure claim, sitting in on an interview with the CEO for a recruit where he would like to hear my opinion, and he would like to see the questions that I have to ask, sitting in on a senior management meeting and strategizing with the team as a lawyer, and as I'm a member of the C-suite, I'm a member of the senior management team, and therefore the future of the business is partially my responsibility as well. So it's legal and non-legal work. I have the benefit, I joined literally 2 months ago, so I moved back in-house from private practice, and I'm currently part of a team of 2. So I have a very young Saudi lawyer who's a new grad as part of the team. He's been in the company 1.5 years, but we are basically building the legal function for this business from scratch. And if you think that this business requires an infrastructure investment north of $4 billion to just get off the ground, we are going to be busy, and we're talking big numbers. So building the right governance structure, building the right legal department structure, looking to then recruit to then fulfill the role that I am thinking the legal department needs to build as this business grows, sustains, start bringing in more projects, and continues to expand. That's the side part of the day job, because the day job on a day-to-day basis is supporting the business. But at the same time, we are building the foundations and the infrastructure of the legal department. So looking at what legal tech can be deployed to help us, looking at what structures we can use, looking at legal operations, which is a relatively new science, sort of from a legal perspective, looking at how the legal department can run as an extremely efficient part of the business. Again, you have to bear in mind, when you're in-house, most legal departments are looked at as a cost center, and therefore you are a drain on money and resources. You're providing value, but no one really in the business enjoys speaking to the lawyer, because there is a perception that the lawyer is either going to block, say no, or he's going to create complication. He or she is going to create complication, and he's going to make life in the business much harder. So it's creating a department that's efficient, that is shown to be additional value to the business, And that is shown not to be a blocker, because you want the business to come to you at every available opportunity. Because when they try to move away, and when they say, "Oh, I'm not sure I want to speak to legal because they're just going to create problems," that's the situation where, one, you get marginalized as a department, but two, the risk for the business exponentially increases. And therefore, it is much harder for you as a legal department to then do your job effectively, which is mitigate that risk before it happens rather than sort of cleaning it up after the event.
So my next question is, what inspired you to run an initiative like MentorMeet, and can you give us an insight into the MentorMeet?
Sure. So MentorMeet is an interesting one, and it is 3 years in development and still under construction. So MentorMeet for me is absolutely a labor of love. I have spent, I don't know how many hours in structuring it and everything else. And every time we sort of take 2 steps forward, we have to take two steps back again because of whatever reason. But MentorMeet is essentially a mentoring program. It's born out of the genesis that in-house lawyers rarely get investment in their personal development. You know, you are there, you are a specialist, you are a cost center, and what you need to know about is the law. Do you need to know about business? Do you need to know about soft skills? No. Is the company going to invest in those departments and those areas of the company that are pure cost centers? It's going to invest in them limitedly. So, you know, the attitude of many businesses, and this is by no means a full generalization, but from my experience, what I've seen is, when I've asked for personal development training, or where I've advocated for personal development training, I've been told, this is not a law course, why do you need it? Right? What we need to make sure is that you are excellent at your knowledge of the law. Now, that excellent could be, oh, we're setting up a subsidiary in Estonia. Can you tell us about Estonian employment law issues? And you go, well, I have no clue. And people look at you like you've fallen out of the sky. So, well, why do we have you here? Well, if you have no clue about Estonian employment law, what are you doing here? Like, well, we're a Middle Eastern-based company. I studied in the UK. I studied in Malta. Estonia wasn't high on my list of priorities, and this is not engineering. A drawing is a drawing. A drawing of a rig is a drawing of a rig anywhere you go in the world. An employment contract changes everywhere you go in the world. And therefore, there isn't always that understanding. So the other element of MentorMeet is we are much more, and we add much more value as lawyers, as part of a business, than the sum total of our legal skills. What I do that is pure legal as part of my job is maybe 20, 30, 40% of my daily work. My daily work is crisis management, it is strategizing, it is assisting, it is understanding the industry, it is providing advice. Some of it is legal, some of it is business, some of it is pure logic and common sense. So I need to invest in myself beyond purely my legal skills. Because if I'm up to date on the latest company law, do I have to be? Yes, absolutely. But if I am not able to lead in a crisis, if I am not able to manage, if I am not able to sell my ideas, my thoughts, my concepts, I am not doing the business any benefit. And I am failing in terms of what I need to bring in terms of value add to the business. So MentorMeet is born out of the need that I see to develop the non-legal side of lawyers' portfolio, right? And portfolio skill set, because we are not, if you can be the best technical lawyer in the world, and you can be extremely poor in being so. Because success does not necessarily come from you being technically gifted. Being technically gifted will help. Absolutely, it will help, because it will open doors. But walking through them and making the best out of an opportunity will not only come out of your technical legal skills, it will come out of your interpersonal skills or soft skills. Your IQ is going to help, your EQ is going to make the biggest difference. So ultimately, MentorMeet is focused on the EQ side. And it's for a big reason. If we look at, as a client of most law firms, every time a new law comes out, I am bombarded by 25 different firms terms of here's a practice note and here's a webinar and here's this event and whatever to update you on your legal skills, right? Making sure that you are up to date with what you do. No one has ever approached me, and no one has really ever approached many in-house lawyers and said, there's a new leadership theory, let's go talk about it together, right? And that to me is a massive misstep, because we are part of a business that is dependent on interaction with humanity. Your success, your standing in the company, the way people listen to you, how much they will listen, how much they pay attention to what you say, isn't going to be born of you quoting a particular case. Because guess what? 99.9% of business people don't care. They don't want legal advice. They want a solution to a business problem, right? So when I receive a memo as a client that is 25 pages long, that includes all the precedent case law and coming up, this judge said this judge said that. Fine. As a lawyer, I appreciate the technical skill that it took to present that piece of information. As a client and as a business person, that has zero use to me unless the landing is, and this is what we're going to do next. Because that is what I have to go to my CEO and say, I have just spent $10,000 on this piece of advice. And all it tells me is it could go one way or it could go the other. And then my boss is going to say, so why did we just spend $10,000? Because we're no better than we were before. We just know more about the problems that we might face one way or the other. But we're not being told which way to jump. And then my job is to spend hours and hours on end dissecting that into a what's next. So the simple answer from my perspective in that situation is I'm not going back to that lawyer, because although he's technically gifted, he didn't understand my problem and he didn't understand my business. And he didn't understand that I have now got egg on my face, standing in front of my CEO, trying to explain why I've just spent a lot of money on something that has zero use to the business, especially in a market like this one. So MentorMeet is essentially, in a very roundabout way, intended to address these issues. And how are we going to do it? We're going to do it through two elements. One is mentoring and one is soft skills training. The mentoring side is essentially looking at junior lawyers, and this is going to be for in-house lawyers at this point, right? MentorMeet is born originally with a regional focus. We started out thinking it would be exclusive to the UAE. We're currently thinking it's probably going to be more expanded towards the Middle East. We are looking to take it international when we can, but baby steps. We are still a startup and therefore we will start small. But essentially we will collate people who want to participate in this program, people who see the benefit of having a mentor in their life or having a mentee in their life. And there are plenty of benefits. I mean, I'm not going to go through them, but from a junior lawyer's perspective, there are certain things you will come and talk to your boss about, and certain things that you can't talk to your boss about. Your weaknesses, your insecurities, etc., depending on the relationship you have with your boss. There are some bosses who will understand and who will appreciate that conversation and who will try and help. And there are some bosses who will go, that person is weak, I have to think about other options. And therefore, a lot of people will be a bit insecure. A mentor is the sort of person who you can go and talk to and gain perspective from. And it is a person who, when the relationship clicks and when you go you're very much on a similar spectrum, then at that point in time, it is a person who will help and give you advice throughout the length of your career. So what are we aiming to do? We're aiming to say, okay, junior in-house lawyers, come and register to the program. Senior in-house lawyers, come and do the same. Because frankly, from a senior in-house lawyer's perspective, this is not a waste of time. There is a benefit, right? Understanding how your team ticks, how the new generation ticks, what drives people, what their insecurities are, what their issues are, has a huge impact on how you manage your team and your day-to-day and how you draw most efficiency and most motivation. A motivated, engaged individual is a lot more productive than a disengaged individual who feels that his boss just doesn't get it, right? So the idea is we'll put junior lawyers and senior lawyers. It's industry agnostic. As long as you're an in-house lawyer, you can participate. These people will answer questionnaires as part of their registration. And that questionnaire will give us an inkling of how people tick, what their personalities are. Because a mentor relationship is also a personal relationship. If it's someone who's very wooden, who you don't really get along with, you are not going to draw the benefit of that mentoring relationship. It's someone who has similar values, who ticks in the same way, who you can have an animated, interesting conversation with. If you can't have that, then sort of the mentoring relationship is not going to draw value. So the mentors take questionnaires, the mentees take questionnaires. We analyze the questionnaires, basically using some tech, and we see which junior lawyers are best matched with which senior lawyers. We put these individuals together. We tell them, okay, go off, meet as often as you want, virtually, over the phone, over coffee, talk. From a junior lawyer, what's eating at you? What are the issues? What are your insecurities? What do you need advice on? You have a senior lawyer with plenty of experience who can guide you. From a senior lawyer's perspective, not only does it, listening to that, give you perspective, but also the senior lawyer can ask questions as well, right? To the junior lawyer, what makes them tick? What makes them get up in the morning and feel like they want to do a good day's work? What really gets them engaged? What doesn't get them engaged? So there's benefits for both sides. So we will let people sort of go and do their thing. We won't be prescriptive about how often you meet, and we'll do that over the course of a year. The idea is the program will keep on rolling year in, year out. You will be matched with a different mentor every year, or a different mentee every year. And by 3 to 4 years, if the program's worked well, a junior lawyer will basically have a non-exec board for their career, right? And their personal development, because you have 3 to 4 people who you will hopefully continue to have a long-term relationship with beyond the program, right? You can still carry on just because the program's ended and that formality has ended. It doesn't mean that you have to stop communicating with this individual. If you've built the right relationship, that individual will be your friend for life. And as your friend with a lot of experience, you can use them as a sounding board. Now imagine as a 25, a 27-year-old, a 28-year-old, a 30-year-old, you have 4 people in their late 40s, late 50s, maybe early 40s, whatever, who you can go to for advice. I'm insecure. I'm thinking about a new job. I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. And these people will actually genuinely give feedback as you've established a good connection and a good relationship over the course of that 1-year mentoring program. And that's what we're looking for. Essentially, it's a non-exec board. If you're looking at it for yourself as a product or as a corporation, and yourself and your career as the development of a company, you now have a non-executive board of directors who will shape your future and give you advice and give you input. And that has a huge amount of value, right? And for free, ultimately, because that's the other element. So that's the mentoring side. And then we move into the soft skills training side. And the soft skills training side is we're partnering with a coach, and we're going to be doing soft skills training on leadership, on knowing yourself, developing your EQ, learning how to lead, manage, market yourself, etc. There are so many ideas of where we could take this curriculum. And the idea is once a quarter, or at least once a quarter at this point in time, we're literally bootstrapping this. So this is all coming out of my own pocket currently, because the current market basically law firms are hemorrhaging money left, right, and center. And so, sponsors are difficult to come by. But the idea is whether live and in person, post-COVID-19, when we're not all wearing masks and social distancing, or during COVID-19, online, we will have a soft skills training session once a quarter where we are basically planting a seed of investment in the personal development of every single participant in our program. And if that seed, because it's a 1.5 hour, 2 hour training session, we're not going to be doing an MBA. We're not going to be doing, what an exec coach can give you. But if we can plant that seed and say, you know what, I need to think about maybe bringing on an exec coach. I meet with an exec coach once a month, right? He's a buddy of mine. We've been working together for 3 to 4 years. He gives me perspective. He gives me guidance. He keeps me grounded. It's a relationship that's developed. And we work on my shortcomings, which are plenty. But the fact that I have someone who is then looking at, he knows nothing about law. He's understanding about the practice of law now because I talk a lot, but he knows nothing about law. What he understands is people, how people tick and how business ticks. And therefore he is reframing my mindset. He is applying techniques that sort of coaches apply in order to improve your personal development. And for me, that's money incredibly well spent. I would rather spend that money on that than spend money on going on a course on negotiation or a course on the new company law or whatever else. Because for me in my future, I believe that this investment on my personal development will actually pay back more than a very technical skills course, because that you can get off the internet, you can get from law firms, you can get wherever. The personal development side, it's pretty much a desert out there at the moment. And we're hoping to fill that gap. So that's MentorMeet in, I wouldn't say a nutshell because I've gone on for a while, but let's say a bag of nut shells, whatever.
So you are involved in field of shipping energy to banking and finance.
Yep.
BSc. What tips and advice would you like to give to a person who want to get skilled in multiple fields like you?
So the advice is work hard, right? Whenever something comes through, I spent the first, I'd say, the majority of the first 10 years of my career in London, in private practice in London, and my hours were off the charts, right? And essentially they were off the charts because whenever a partner or a senior associate or whoever came in and said, do you have capacity? Whether I was working till 6 p.m. or I was working till 10 p.m., the answer was always yes. And that's because every single deal is an opportunity to learn. Now, work-life balance is important. I flirted with burnout on a number of occasions. But realistically, you learn better by doing. And sometimes you learn by making mistakes. I've made mistakes. I've been lucky to have partners who had my back when I made those mistakes. And therefore, they were a positive experience, a harrowing one, but generally a positive experience rather than a negative one. You never make the same mistake twice, right? Because it's just etched in your brain and you don't want to let down the people who have sort of depended on you and who invest in you and who sort of mentor and tutor you on a daily basis. So you never make the same mistake twice, but you will make mistakes. That's part of learning, and that's absolutely fine. Hopefully the mistake doesn't cost the company or the firm much, or it's fixable. But again, another piece of advice: if you do make a mistake, own up to it immediately, because the more you try to cover for it, the worse it's going to get, and the worse the consequences are going to get. So rather than trying to fix it yourself, go and find help of someone senior and fix it with him or her, rather than just go and say, I've made this mistake, now please go and fix it. I'm just going to be here in the corner crying. It's going to be, I've made this mistake. I'm not quite sure how to fix it. I'm thinking this and this and this. Can you help me? I'm here and I'm happy to do most of the legwork. But beyond that, I was lucky. At this point in time, in a lot of law firms, you get specialized very, very quickly, right? So you are thrown into a department, and unless you have the ability to sort of migrate between those departments, or unless that department is to a degree sector agnostic and seeing a wide variety of deals, you tend to get sort of relatively specialized relatively quickly. That's not necessarily a bad thing if there is sustainability in your specialism. So obviously watch out for that, because this is your career and your future, but I would say just take on as much work from as many different people as possible and learn as much as you can. And it's not a case of sitting back and waiting for the work to come to you. Over the last sort of year and a half, I've been sort of watching interns when I was in private practice, sort of coming in and how they behave. And you have a group of interns who will sit down and just wait for work, and sort of sit at their desk and browse the internet if nothing comes through, and this and that and the other. And you will have other interns who will actively walk around the office asking people for work. And if people say they don't have work, asking people what they're actually doing and if they can watch and if they can just listen in on a phone call, on a conference call or something of the sort. And most of the time, the answer you're going to get from a lawyer, unless something is very, very commercially sensitive, is yes, sure, no worries, right? Explaining what you're on, etc., will be a factor of how busy the person is. But just try to make those connections. Law is a very interpersonal human business. If you sit back and wait for stuff to come to you, guess what? It's most likely not going to. You need to be proactive. You need to do stuff. You need to be engaged with the individuals doing the work and with your colleagues. And guess what? Most lawyers enjoy talking. And they enjoy talking about themselves and about what they're doing and how good they are and how, you know, unreasonable the client is being, or, you know, how reasonable the other side is being, and how brilliant they are in figuring out a way to get around this unreasonable client or this unreasonable counterparty. And you know what? A lot of it is fluff, and a lot of it is sort of, you know, ego fluffing by that lawyer. But there are nuggets that you will be able to learn. You know, I used to play, you know, cards at university, and the guy who always won during our poker nights always had one mantra: you play the man, you don't play the card. If you play the hand you're dealt only, and you're not looking at what the others around you are doing, you are taking a very, very, very narrow approach. If you understand who's sitting around the table with you, and you understand how they react, how they tick, how they interact, then you have a much greater chance of success. Now, if you are transplant that into a working environment, if you understand how your colleagues tick, and you understand how best to connect with them, and you understand how to get the best out of them, you are going to have a much better career and a much easier life in terms of your working life. Because not only are you going to approach different people differently and therefore have a better chance of success, it's not a one-size-fits-all model, but you are going to be perceived as this person who adds value and brings positivity. And that perception is invaluable, because people enjoy working with people they like. And therefore, if someone likes you, they are going to be much more willing to spend time working with you, to give you responsibility, and to invest in your development. If they don't like you, if they see you as passive, if they see you as just sitting back and waiting for stuff to happen, you are going to get very few people who are going to spend the time and energy in investing in you guys. Just like what you guys are doing with this initiative, which is taking the bull by the horns, being proactive, creating a community, trying to sort of help others. That's visibility. That is something that is going to give you a leg up versus other people who are competing with you, who are saying, my grades will do the job. Guess what? There are tons of people out there who have good grades. If we're in law school and we're making a success about it, we're intelligent people. The profession is built on intelligent people. The differentiators, the really successful people, the rainmakers, the ones who make it to the top of the profession, have that extra over and above the intelligence. They have the charisma, they have the spark, they have that thing that makes them connect with people, that makes them see and spot opportunities and take advantage of them. Once you show yourself to be that type of person, you can see an angle, you can exploit it, you're willing to do the hard work to bring it to the market and do whatever you need. That's a differentiator in the market. If I'm looking to employ, and if we see sort of a number of business leaders, you know, if they're looking at CVs over and over again and speaking to 100 applicants, attitude is what is going to differentiate people in that room. It's not, oh, I got a first, I got 100 out of 100 in every single exam, blah, blah, blah. Excellent. Fantastic. Okay. A robot can get 100 out of 100. If I put a robot in front of a client, I'm not going to get that piece of work. If I've got a human that behaves like a robot in front of a client, I'm not going to get that piece of work. If I've got a human who got a 75 in all those exams, but can really click with a client, I'm going to land that piece of work and make money. And that's the big differentiator.
So my next question is, amidst this pandemic, we are seeing a price war between countries like Russia and OPEC. So
Yep.
how do you see this situation, and what is your legal perspective on it?
So again, it's a business problem that has legal implications. So my first approach to it is, how does it impact business? Because that's going to drive what my work is going to be like, and what the work of a lot of people in private practice. Remember, from a legal perspective, unless you are a policymaker that drafts law, you are reacting to trying to solve problems that the market is coming to you to try to solve, right? So you are not a driver of change. You are an implementer or an executor of the change that is being driven by whatever is happening in the market. So what you're seeing right now is, you know, the oil market, the price of oil has collapsed. It's starting to recover a little bit. It's fluctuating, but we're seeing price wars. We're seeing nationalism. We're seeing people sort of battening down the hatches. Now, what does that mean? That means there is an immediate economic impact, right? For all producing companies, there is an immediate economic impact. And that economic impact then leads to a social impact, right? So jobs are being lost. Businesses are suffering from cash flow problems. Businesses are having to cut down on costs. So a lawyer's job in that scenario is realistically to assist the business to survive. And how do you assist the business to survive? It's whether you're taking part in a redundancy program and making sure that that redundancy program doesn't cost the company more than it has to, right? That's not pleasant work, but ultimately, if you get that wrong, the company's attempt to save money by laying off people becomes more expensive because you get sued for having done it wrong, and you spend a hell of a lot of money trying to do it. And that sort of negates the whole point of trying to optimize these costs. It's, litigation tends to go up in these types of scenarios if people are trying to hold on to their contracts a lot more. They are trying to make sure that they don't have to crystallize or absorb losses. So there is a lot of legal knock-on effect. So certain lawyers in certain industries, oil and gas, shipping, for example, are going to be extremely busy, right? At the same time, M&A and normal financings and sort of those types of deals aren't going to be as prevalent. Or if they are happening, they're going to be done with a much more cost-conscious approach. So the fees that you could have generated from such a deal are going to be reduced because every single entity is looking at this going, my upside has just reduced, so the cost of execution of this deal is going to need to reduce as well. So pressure on fees. So lawyers are going to be needed, but they're going to be needed more cheaply to a degree. And then there are those lawyers who have those clients who go, I don't care what the price is, I just need this person here because he's going to give me that result and it's worth the investment. So you will have the top tier firms will continue to do relatively well and be able to charge still their premiums. The mid tier is going to get extremely competitive and sort of extremely cutthroat. So there are a lot of implications. The market, the other element is in a downturn and in a market where people are trying to, protect their cash flow and stop hemorrhaging money, bills don't get paid as quickly, right? So you might do the work, but collecting the cash for that work is going to be an issue. So there's a lot of dynamics that are thrown into as a law firm, as a law community. We are a service provider to business. And therefore, when business drops, yes, lawyers will be busy. Restructurings will increase, et cetera, but that's not everyone, because we are specialized in what we do. And there are niches that are, more responsive to downturns than others. In a massive economic upturn, the restructuring lawyers are twiddling their thumbs. In this kind of market, the restructuring lawyers might be some of the busiest people in the firm, right? So there are cycles, and as law firms and as lawyers, we tend to benefit from both sides of that cycle, from an upturn and a downturn, but we benefit differently. So it's a case of how those bets are hedged in terms of where you've invested. You've invested either in practices that boom on an upturn, or you've invested in practices that boom on a downturn, or you have a good balance between the two. From an in-house perspective, the challenge becomes do even more with even less, right? In the sense that we need you more, it gets busier. The problems that come across legal's desk become more complicated. They grow in number simply because the business is cautious, and therefore stuff that the business would sometimes do without necessarily going to legal. The risk of it going wrong is amplified in a downturn market, and therefore basically people want to cover their backside, so they go to the lawyer, right? And so there is more intensity and there is more pressure on an in-house legal team. And there is also more pressure to cut costs, right? So if you were allowed to outsource certain things beforehand, or you had budgets, those budgets are likely to be slashed. And yet your output is your requirement for output is going to increase. So you are busier than usual, with the ability to spend less than usual on external help, and with more pressure than usual. So, but that's the life of a lawyer. If you don't want that pressure, if you don't want to need to be able to respond, if you don't want to receive a call from your CEO at 2:00 in the morning because he's had a bad dream about something that has woken him up in a cold sweat, and he needs to be reassured that that problem is in hand, that we've got a strategy, we've got a handle on it, etc., then this isn't the career for you. Because guess what? I've answered phone calls at 4 o'clock in the morning on Christmas morning. And, you know, you go to the kitchen, you tell your CEO, listen, I need a cup of coffee before I'm able to process this and give you an answer. But, you know, hang on the phone, let's talk. What's worrying you? How can I help? Et cetera, et cetera. And ultimately, that's what we're there for. We are there not to go, oh, look at me, I'm a lawyer, I have a law degree, bow down to my greatness. Those days are gone, right? It used to be the case 30, 40 years ago where you walked into a room, you were the lawyer, and people went, oh, wow. You know, to be honest, the general attitude to business in most jurisdictions, you walk into your room, you're the lawyer, and people go, oh, God, right? So it's a different environment. We have to work harder for what we're doing. And that's absolutely fine. As long as you're adding value and doing hard work, then you'll thrive. But yeah, it's supporting a business wherever you can, whether you're in private practice or in-house. It's being that support, trying to continue to add as much value and trying to mitigate as much risk as possible. That's the job of the lawyer in a downturn market. And you try and benefit where you can. Because again, law is a business. The practice of law, especially for law firms, is a business, and it is a service business that is dependent on its clients. If the clients are doing badly, then no lawyer is going to be viewed from a long-term perspective as someone who is profited from clients doing badly. If you're looked at as the corporate leech, that is not a sustainable long-term business relationship. Sustainable long-term business relationships are win-win relationships. So you have to add value. Law firms have to share some degree of pain with the companies they are working with in hard times. And I think that's, in more sophisticated jurisdictions, that's understood. Not by everyone, but hopefully it's understood. Those people who make a success of practicing law understand that there are points in time where if your client is benefiting, you will benefit. If your clients are hurting, then you're expected to hurt a little bit with it.
Yeah. So I was asking, what changes do you see in the maritime law in the future with respect to technology being incorporated in the industry?
So one thing to note is that shipping has historically not been a particularly sexy industry. In terms of transport, shipping is sort of down there with sort of road haulage. Aviation is the sort of sexy, let's get on a plane and go somewhere nice and whatnot. So, you know, shipping is the guy in the corner who does a hell of a lot of hard work and carries 90% of world trade. And if you look around you, you know, 90% of the stuff in the room has been on board a ship or has been transported either as a raw material or as a finished product on board a container or on board a ship of some sort and traveled the world to get to you. We are seeing increasing regulation across the shipping environment, and that is mostly environmentally driven. And that's meaning that costs of operations are going up, which has an impact on the industry. The industry is potentially, on the whole, less obviously profitable and more challenging. And so there are a lot of pressures, but that pressure brings with it opportunity, and tech is one of those opportunities. But bear in mind, you know, ships have been largely the same for the last 30 to 40 years, right? They haven't really changed in shape. The engineering has improved. We've had a few improvements here or there in terms of, you know, making ships more efficient. But there hasn't been that sort of Uber or Amazon or whatever in the shipping industry, right? So technology is slowly starting to come in, and there are huge efficiency benefits that technology can bring. But shipping is a very it's an industry that's spread out. It is not particularly amalgamated. It is a very international industry. You don't have the sort of, like aviation, you don't have the British Airways or the Lufthansa or the Emirates or the sort of Air India of this world that are your prime national carriers. You know, you have ship owners can have from sort of 200 ships to one, right? And they're doing practically the same job. So the industry is very diverse and it's very dispersed, and that means that there is a lot of competition. But what it also means is that, you know, the adoption of technology and adoption rates of technology are slower than other industries. One, it's B2B, and therefore B2B historically is a slower adopter of technology than B2C, because, you know, clients, individuals like newfangled gadgets, they like technology, they like being able to show off something new. They like being sort of on the cusp of. Businesses are much more cautious, and especially if your margin is limited. Oh, I want to try and test the product. I don't want to be the guinea pig. I don't want to be the one that takes that risk. I want something that's really going to make me extra money or extra margin. And so you're seeing a number of shipping startups, and sort of I was connected to one. I tried to set up my own sort of shipping technology startup with a partner of mine in between jobs, and we sort of flirted with the idea of sort of abandoning our legal careers and sort of diving into our startup. We both sort of took the decision at that point that it wasn't the right time. The technology was still a bit too frontier. It would have taken us at least 3 to 4 years to make something of it. And 3 to 4 years of very hard work. But to get that adoption, and to be honest, neither of us was ready to make that sacrifice or to make that commitment. I, for one, have a young family. The idea of sort of jumping into a startup and staking my kids' education and my ability to pay for their tuition wasn't something I was willing to do at the time. But you see a lot of, especially young entrepreneurs and sometimes big companies like Maersk, investing in technology now. And blockchain is going to be a massive game changer for shipping when adoption really sort of comes into play. COVID-19's thrown a bit of spanner in the works. It's going to my mind, have an impact of delaying that adoption of technology. People are going to go back to what's tried and tested, even if it's more expensive, just simply because it's tried and tested and it's familiar, and they can't afford to take any risks. But at the same time, this also provides an opportunity for tech to justify itself, saying, if you can't afford to be as inefficient in terms of your operations anymore, you need to be able to take that risk. For many companies, these types of markets are going to be make or break. And therefore you can sort of say, well, if you're basically on your last legs and need a game changer for the future of your company, then take that risk on tech. Because frankly, not going the tech way has not helped, has brought you to where you are right now. So there will be a number of possibly smaller companies, possibly companies that are, in a bit more of a sort of wobbly financial situation, playing their last card on technology with a view to trying to survive, and sort of that's their Hail Mary. That's their Hail Mary pass, to use sort of an American metaphor, and saying, this is it. If this doesn't work, then we're out. But at least we're going to give it a shot and give it the best shot with technology to improve efficiency. And if it does work, we're back in the game. We're more efficient than our competitors, and we're actually going to do much better than we've ever done before, because that's the reality of some of the technology platforms that there are at the moment. So it's a challenging industry. It's an industry that historically has been very, very conservative in terms of adoption of tech, but we are seeing a lot of startups cropping up. I advise a couple of startups on the side as a sort of, not as a board member, but as a sort of quasi advisory role in terms of, market penetration, which industries, where to go, making connections with people. You will see that I'm more interested in the people side of law than in the law side of law. And because I'm more interested in the people side of law and the people side of the industry, I am able to make those connections. I am able to have someone come to me and say, I'm doing X for the business. I'm thinking about bunkering. I'm thinking about blockchain technology and bunkering of ships and whatever else. And I go, you know what? I know a guy, and I've had plenty of conversations, who owns a few ships, who's thinking about this because he wants a leg up over his competitors. And this is a conversation that you might want to have. And because I have those connections, I am able to bring those two people together. And maybe something happens, maybe nothing happens. But there is always value in having that type of conversation. Whether the value is you've discounted the idea and you now know not to waste more time on it, or the value is actually it's planted a seed that can lead to an opportunity. Both those conversations have value, and both those conversations should be had at every possible opportunity.
Last but not the least, what would be your parting message to the law students or the professionals who have just started their career and wants to pursue maritime law?
Learn about the industry. Be knowledgeable about the industry and not just about law. A shipping lawyer can't hold him or herself to be a shipping lawyer if they have never set foot on a ship, if they don't understand the reality. If you are listening to what people in the industry say and you don't know what they're talking about, then you are not going to be able to do your job well. right? If you want to pursue a career in maritime law, the maritime bit comes before the law bit. The law bit is what you're studying. That's fine. That's the foundation. Your industry expertise are going to determine how good you are going to be in your career and how successful you are going to be in your career, because clients want you to understand their industry and understand their language, because the advice that we give is not advice in a vacuum, right? Yes, we have to give legal advice, but if the legal advice has no practical industry sense, then that legal advice is worthless, right? So if you propose something to a company that there's no way in hell they could implement, they're just going to look at you and say, well, that was a waste of time. And guess what? They're never coming back, because corporate memory, institutional memory is quite long, right? And there will be people in the organization that said, yeah, I spoke to David, we gave him that opportunity, and he came back with advice that was really, really crap and showed that he didn't understand our industry or our business, right? I spend a lot of time, or I used to spend a lot of time, let me say that, in private practice, getting to know my clients and getting to know their business, not just as individuals, that's important, right, as human beings, but also what was important to them from a business perspective, how they made money, how they lost money, what bits of the business were more risky than others, and why they did things in a certain way. And some of them will make sense and some of them will not make sense. But if you establish a good enough relationship with your clients, you are able to ask what would otherwise be seen as stupid questions, right? And there is no such thing as a stupid question. But ultimately, when you are learning, you ask things, because we all process in different ways, right? So learn about the industry. The second piece of advice is learn about yourself, right? When you are practicing law, whether you are in private practice or you are in-house, you are a product and you are a brand. And now I'm not taking away the humanity of it all, right? So you're not a machine, but you are a product, you are a brand. Brand David exists. And brand David is something that I spend time curating carefully, because I want the perception of the market of me to be a positive one. And I want to be part of controlling. It's not you're a woman, you're a Hindu, you're a Muslim, you're this, you're Christian, you're whatever, right? It's I don't get the way you think. I don't get the way you operate. I don't get why this for you is so much more important than that, right? And the whole book basically is surrounded on the premise that there are 4 different types of people, right? You have your aggressive leaders, and you have your passive sort of OCD, love attention to detail, et cetera, and you have a spectrum in between. And none of us are just one color. We are all a mix of both. But the more we understand how each color operates and how those character traits operate and how they translate into the working environment, the more we understand how to get the best out of each other and how to not ask for something that would be anathema to whoever you are asking it from. If you are asking a guy who spends his time daydreaming about ideas and sort of living at 37,000 feet to project manage something detail by detail and going in and spending months and years on pure process, that guy is not the right guy for you. They are going to be bored. They are going to be disengaged. It is not the right skill set. If you ask the guy who loves the detail and loves the process, go away and do some blue sky thinking, he's not going to be the right person for you either, right? He or she is going to spend so much time on the ground floor thinking about every single step of the way and every single problem that these are not the people who really come up with the startup unicorn idea, right? They are the people who implement and execute the startup unicorn idea, but you need the one person, whether it's a he or a she, to come up with the blue sky thinking and say, I have an idea that can change the world. And then you need the other person who says, well, it's going to take 2,500 steps to get that idea from your brain to execution. That's the bit that I love. Step 1 has 27 sub-steps. I will walk you through each one of them, and I will work through each one of them, and I will have an absolute blast doing it. The person coming up with the idea is going to go, don't talk about the detail, just get it done. I'm off thinking about my next thing. Whereas The person who loves the detail is going, right, okay, this is going to take us 6 months. The first step is going to take me 2 days, and then I'm going to spend time doing this, and then I'm going to spend time doing that. And there is nothing wrong with either of them. They are both phenomenal at what they do. They are both absolutely essential in a dynamic. But if we don't get each other, we are not going to be able to work together. So spend time investing in your humanity and understanding yourself, what makes you tick, and others. Because our IQ gets us through the door. Our EQ keeps us in the job and keeps us getting the promotions. So your CV at the start will get you an interview with a law firm. Will get you an interview. Your grades, be it sort of your first class degree, your top of the class grades, is going to get you through the door, because in that situation, we're looking at potential. And your grades show the potential. But if you then walk into that interview and completely underwhelm people by being wooden, by being robotic, by not being enthusiastic, by basically saying, I'm just going to sit at my desk and just wait for people to do the work, and then I'm going to knock it out of the park when I do it, but I'm not really going to do anything more than that. You know, that's the point. I had a very close friend who is a phenomenal lawyer, absolutely phenomenal lawyer, close friend from uni, excellent, technically incredibly gifted. The reason I used to study with him is I used to learn a hell of a lot more from him than he used to learn from me. And we used to have the debates. And, you know, one tenet in business is surround yourself with people who are more intelligent than you are. As a leader, I want to surround myself with people who are more intelligent than I am, because I will gain the benefit. I don't feel threatened by that. I gain the benefit of that. They make me look good in doing my job. And eventually they will take my job. Fine, absolutely, not a problem. I will move on to the next thing. But this was a perfect example of surrounding myself with people who were better than I am. And he was a fantastic lawyer. But man, he sucked at interviews. And man, he sucked at coming across and showing people how good he was. You sat with him and you watched him work, you go, wow. You sat with him in a meeting and you go, whoa, no, this doesn't work for me. I'm not sure that this is the right person for me. So again, you don't send that person into a meeting on their own. You put the deal closer in there, and you put him in there to say, and this is how we're going to execute, and this is how potentially how we're going to screw over the other side, or whatever, right? But both elements are important. The problem is, when I lined up that guy to work in my firm, and I lined him up for an interview, he was entirely underwhelming and didn't get the job, right? And eventually, he's gone on to invest in himself and sort of deal with that part where he wasn't quite up to scratch, because he realized. And that made a massive difference, because he's aced every single interview since, right? And he's sort of developed in his career, and now he has his own business, and sort of he's wildly successful and doing great things. But at the beginning of our careers, it didn't matter that he was a much better lawyer than I was. I had the job and he didn't. And that was because I came across much better in the interview. Versus, we're both good lawyers. I'm not at his level. He's a phenomenal lawyer, right? But he just wasn't able to come across as such. So the other piece of advice is work hard. Simple. You learn by doing. If you are not willing to work hard, this is an industry that requires graft, especially in the early years, frankly, in the later years as well, right? You find very few lawyers who have a sort of simple 9-to-5 life, right? If that's what you want, this is not necessarily the industry for you. This is not what you should be doing, right? This is a constant pressure, heavy hours, work hard, frankly, not get thanks for it many times, because we're not necessarily liked massively as an industry and as a profession. But if you think you can make a difference and you're willing to work hard and roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty, then go for it. Absolutely. I mean, the other element, learn about business. Don't just learn law, learn about business. Learn how to read a balance sheet. Learn what motivates people. Learn what motivates businesses. Learn about your client. Learn what startups do and how they scale. Learn what established organizations do, why they merge, what the economies of scale are. Learn about their business models, etc. Because they are what you're going to be servicing. And therefore, if you don't understand them, you are not going to be able to service them appropriately. If you want to do criminal law, learn about the criminal mind, by all means. I'm a business transactional lawyer. So for me, it's absolutely important to know about business. If I don't, I am not able to do my job well. Just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean that you understand business. And bear in mind one thing, law is a business. Whether you are in private practice, if you want to make partner, you'll be increasingly responsible for the business sides of the firm. And you need to understand that. And you need to be ready to want to disrupt that, because the older models don't always work, right? But the more you know about business and running a business and what drives a business and about costs and about OPEX and CAPEX and all these different elements, right? You know, about being able to read a balance sheet and spotting the knowing the law. There is the people element, there is the business element, and there is obviously the law element. But you know what? The further you get onto the career in your career, the less the law element becomes the predominant element that is going to determine your success. And the more the human element, the people element, and the business element take a much more important role in terms of your dynamic. When you start out, it's sort of 80% law, 10% people, 10% business, right? By the time you're making partner, it's 30% law, 40% people, you know, and however much left is business. So, you know, it's going to change. It's going to change, and you need to change with it. And don't be afraid of change, right? Don't be afraid of change. Constantly invest in your own personal development, not just your legal skills, because there is so much we don't know out there, and it's fine. But if you stop growing, you're just taking steps backward in your career.
Thank you so much for having an interaction with us. It will definitely gonna benefit a lot of young minds, and I hope we can have more conversations like this in future also.
Absolutely.
We are delighted to have the time with you at Law Community. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for your time, and keep up the good work, guys. Good luck to everyone. Thanks.